Ben.
Stefan.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here.
What have you been up to?
Watching movies, of course.
Like what?
Oh, I'm doing a Leslie Nielsen kick right now, so I did all the Naked Guns,
Okay.
you know, with OJ and Priscilla.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing Mr. Magoo, which
And-
is absolutely hilarious.
When you say now you're doing, you mean like you paused in the middle to come here, or you're watching it multiple times?
I was watching it earlier today, and I don't like pausing movies in between.
I know.
Do you like Mr. Magoo? Like the whole cartoon and stuff?
Kind of. Yeah, I don't know it that well.
I just think it's so funny that he can't see anything, and he just tells people what's wrong with them, and it's a great character.
It's a really good bit. Did I even tell you who the guests are today?
Actually, no, I have no. I was wondering why I was in the basement.
Okay, so
Yeah.
our friend Zoe Lister-Jones.
Zoe Lister-Jones is here.
Yeah.
You want to know a fun fact about Zoe Lister-Jones?
I would.
She, a couple years ago, goes, I need some of your clothes. I give her a bundle of my clothes, hats, outfits. These overalls actually right here, these exact overalls. And on Halloween, she dressed up as me.
Wait, I think I was.
You were there at Halloween. You
It was
were
in this
here.
room.
She came to Halloween as me.
That's
She looked like
Did
Dennis
you-
the Menace.
Yeah, I was gonna, did you like it or did it not
Yeah,
work?
it was all right. She's 5'3",
Yeah.
so it was like a little bit like, looked like a kid.
Charming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cute.
The other guest is Martin Rev from Suicide.
This one.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what a badass.
Yeah.
Now I know Dream,
Yeah.
Baby Dream.
Yeah.
What's it? Give me another one.
Oh, Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider. Oh, the fucking rad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Surrender, I'm a recent favorite of mine. I got into his solo records lately too. Like, there's one called "See Me Riding" that doesn't sound like Suicide at all.
When did that
Sounds
come
like I think mid-90s, like '96. They sound like old school songs of heartbreak. It's really beautiful.
You get to talk to him about that today?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Don't not do that. You have to talk to him about that record.
yeah. I'm going to, but I should get a drink. Yeah.
That's why you're here. Yeah, you don't want to talk to me at
No,
all.
can you help me with that?
I can. What do you want?
I was gonna get. I want to have like a signature drink for the show, like call it the nighttime or something.
Oh my God, it's so funny you say that. Because the nighttime here at Ray's Bar is just illegal mezcal on ice.
You have got to be kidding.
Can you believe that? This lovely, lovely drink.
Wow. Well, can I have 2 of those?
Yes, you can. Of
Thank
course you
you.
can.
Thank you.
Heavy pour.
Oh God,
Look at that. I have ice ready and everything.
that is a really heavy pour.
Would you like a lime?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. This is good stuff. Don't tell Zoe the
Thank
Dennis
you.
the Menace thing.
Yeah. Right.
Ah.
Oh hi, Zoe.
Oh, hi. Oh, thank you so
Oh, you're
much.
welcome so much. It's very nice to see you here.
So nice to be here.
This is the first place I ever hung out with you.
I know.
And this is the room where I saw you dressed up as Ben for Halloween.
Yeah.
Is that a last minute idea or is that a long simmering idea?
You know, it was pretty last minute. I would say like a week prior. I'm not good at Halloween costumes.
I don't
I've
know
never been good at them.
But do you always do them?
Never. Ben was really my
The
first.
Ben
I
was
found
my
my
first
muse.
too.
Yeah. He was my first. Yeah, many things.
Had to happen. I think that year I dressed up as like a Bob Seger roadie.
Yeah.
Did that work for you?
Well, yes, and we've
Well, I
talked
know you like
about.
Bob Seger, but
and
it was a-
Night Moves is my favorite song, and
Yeah.
you have a Night Moves jacket.
Yeah, it was it's a Night Moves tour jacket that has the
Yeah.
bullet. I just didn't know if it was a good costume. It was like a wig, and it was an excuse to show the jacket.
Yeah.
To friends I had told about it.
Yeah.
But I think it worked.
I think it worked,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think anybody was talking about it the next day, and I feel many people were talking about my costume the next day,
So it
but it's
didn't
not a
work.
competition.
Okay. Yeah. Hanging out the first night here is now this like apocryphal tale in my mind because it was, to me, like my Mr. Kool-Aid moment out of lockdown. Because
Oh.
like it was, I feel like I've been hiding, not doing that much. Friend comes into town, go out, and that kicked off like, to me, that big summer. And like hanging out, that's first night I met Ben, first night like,
That was the first night you met Ben?
yes, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So a lot of firsts. And now it's kind of like shortly thereafter is like when I wanted to do the show, like hanging out here and talking to
Yeah. So Ray's is your muse.
Ray. Ray is my muse.
Ray.
Ray. We get coffees
good old
once a
old
week.
Ray.
Yeah. We get
Yeah.
Rusty Nails down in the corner bar. So I wanted to ask you about, so when did you make your pandemic movie? When did it shoot? Like how it ends, I mean, I'm calling it the pandemic movie because I think it's like actually really interesting that it's both a standalone artwork and also I was just checking it out again and thinking how much it's going to be this lasting pandemic document.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it definitely is like a timestamp of a moment.
But it doesn't feel like that on purpose. Like, it's not like there are other
Yeah.
things that happen where, like, we're gonna take this great thing that's normally good and then, like, do it on Zoom and make it really sad. And this actually felt like a thing
I know.
that
There were
weaves in
so-
elements
yeah.
of it.
Yeah. There were a lot of movies after How It Ends that were like a couple breaking up, like with like a lot of like iPhone footage, and I was like, I don't want to watch that. Yeah, we shot that probably in June of
Oh.
2020.
Oh.
So it was early.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was really early.
It's so great when suddenly you meet up with someone outside and then it cuts to the wide and you're like socially
So
distanced.
far apart.
It's like, wanna go
Yeah,
smoke
there
a
was
joint?
like there were no like the only way that we knew how to make people feel comfortable was to be outdoors and 6 feet, at least 6 feet apart. I think for a lot of people it was their first time like going out.
Yeah.
It was like their year night at Ray's.
Yeah, right.
I think Olivia Wilde, it was like her first time driving her car. Like driving her car, maybe like, because it was like we were all just like ordering groceries and we were in LA, so it was like we weren't leaving the house. So there was definitely something thrilling, I think, about us just literally seeing another human body, but also making something, you know?
I think I told you this before, but not on camera, so I'll tell you again. But maybe I didn't tell you. Where I live, it looks out right at the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And, which is cool.
Right, you live near my mom,
Wait, where's she?
Vinegar Hill.
Who I've also hung out with. We had a great time at your birthday.
Yeah.
I just mentioned this to say, like, looking at the activity or lack thereof on the bridge
Yeah.
was the crazy metric for me of what was going on in the world.
Yeah.
Went from everyday people, like, risking life in them to take a good selfie, to totally quiet, to 6 hours one day of a guy pacing back and forth on top of the, what do we call it, stanchion, pillar, foundation.
Really?
Yep, dangling his legs off, police trying to get him back in, coming back in. It was fine. Then finally people back on it. But which is interesting, everyone has their little mile markers for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
It looked like that movie was really fun to make.
It was fun to make.
Like it had energy that, or it feels at least like people were enjoying it.
Yeah, it was a way smaller crew than this. It was like it was like 3 people.
Yoinks.
And this is like no, there's like a legitimate
So you're saying
crew.
it's like really professional.
No, I'm saying this is professional, and what we made was like drastically less professional. Yeah, no, it was just like teensy, and that was really nice because I had come off of like making a bigger movie, and so it was so nice to like just make something tiny.
And that's how you met younger you, right? Making the previous bigger
Yeah,
movie.
Kaylee Spaney,
Yeah.
who plays younger me in that movie. Yeah, she was in this movie called The Craft that I made before that.
I got a real tongue lashing for not having watched the original Craft in my youth. So I watched it in close, rapid succession with yours.
oh, yeah.
I did like, I
Oh
had
yeah,
my
that's a good way to
Craft moment.
do it.
Yeah, it felt
A
great.
double feature.
Yeah. It was really cool that you did that. I really liked it.
Thanks.
I couldn't like, was the original one an iconic thing for you? And I hate that word, but I said it.
Yeah. I was like I don't know. I was like snotty about popular culture as like a youth.
As you should
as
be.
I
yeah,
should be,
yeah.
you know.
Well, where'd you grow up again?
In Brooklyn.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, grew up
Should I
in
say
New
it
York.
louder?
Yeah.
I grew up in Brooklyn.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 5 children, all named Brooklyn.
Yeah. So like The Craft was like a little bit mainstream.
Right. Thank you. I missed a
so-
lot of good shit now
Me too.
because of that.
Because of that.
Because we were looking down our nose.
yeah.
Yeah, good for us.
And then and good for us.
yeah, we earned it.
Yeah. But then when I did watch it later, I was like, yeah, this was seminal.
Well, there's like my friend's dad who like is obsessed with The Move and all these other more esoteric bands and hated Rumors and hated Tusk. So all of, I don't want to speak for you, us, end up getting into it belatedly, and it becomes this
Right.
like cool kid album that's okay, and he's like, you guys are such assholes.
Oh,
They're like
yeah.
the corniest, that's who we would turn the dial away from.
Yeah. I like refused to purchase Beck Odelay. Thought it
Wow.
was too mainstream.
That was in my wheelhouse. That was
What
in my
a
wheelhouse.
fucking nut job.
Oh, that one I really went for. Okay, well, that's the whole thing. I was really into that. I was obsessed with the Beastie Boys. There's a whole like crew there.
right.
The Blues Explosion had a remix that featured Mike D
Right.
and Beck. It was all like I
Okay.
assumed he was like the friend that was about for by
This is
another
the
friend.
younger you that's trying to like justify
Getting into the
mainstream. You don't have to do that anymore.
No. What? Well, I guess not.
Yeah.
I still get self-conscious sometimes if I'm like, If like the 7th movie in a row that I watched was made, for a $1 billion budget, I'd feel a little bit like a moron.
Yeah.
Not a very discerning viewer.
Oh.
No, I am. That makes me feel like not one. If I'm constantly just eating the candy.
The candy. Sometimes you just gotta eat the candy, though. You know.
Fine.
I've been watching the Kardashians.
Oh, talk to me. I don't. Who are they? Tell me everything.
I'm just saying, who are they? Well, where do I begin? They're a family.
Is this on the heels of having watched the original? Because it used to be called, to my understanding, Keeping Up With.
It sure did.
And now they took it out.
No,
and
I
rebranded.
didn't. I wasn't watching the original because I had shame around too much candy.
So this is a sign of you evolving.
And now I've evolved, and it's whenever I want the candy, I can get the candy, and I can eat it for as long as I want.
My issue is, and I won't besmirch this person because one of my favorite musicians ever, but I remember getting older, going to see a legacy act who historically had been like arbiter of cool. Kind of like laconic, tough shit. I go to the show and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? There's an electronic drum set. There's like extra singers singing the part for him. He starts playing these old songs and instead of playing them, is talking through like, hey, but you thought this song was a few chords. I'm like, oh no. Like, so I do sometimes worry that there's a rationale here where like when you're younger, you really have 20/20 vision of what is cool or good. Cool being a stand-in for valuable to you or something.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, it's like, well, there it is, and it's not there. You lost it. So that
Yeah.
scares me.
Yeah, about us getting old and not cool.
But we're fine. Well, I think
we're
okay.
fine for now.
Yeah. Are there any good records you're listening to now that we feel good about?
Good records that we feel good about. I like this record by this woman, Lael Neal. I don't know how you pronounce her name. Lael Neal.
Neither do I.
She's great.
Oh, I'm old.
Whitmer Thomas. Do you
Okay.
know him? He's.
I was so much more in the loop when I was actually in a band, and now I'm just out to lunch.
Oh yeah. No, you're not out to lunch. I'm sure you've got cool people that cool kids are listening to too.
Yeah, like the guy who's coming later today to hang out with us.
That's a cool
pretty cool.
kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's the coolest.
Who, by the way, Martin Rev, Suicide. You, by total coincidence.
Yeah.
When I told you this was happening, unless you were bullshitting me, you really used a Suicide song to open the new show?
Yeah, I have this new show that's coming out on Roku, and the opening entire montage is Dream Baby Dream. And then you were like, do you want to be on this show with Martin Rev? And I was like, you're kidding.
I can't believe that happened.
Because that song's been living in me now for the last 5 months.
That song also doesn't, well, you'll know because you spent 5 months with it, but that song has never, ever gotten tired to me.
No.
Yeah, I feel like I get lost in it every time I listen.
Yeah.
Was it hard? I feel like historically, I imagine they were hard to pin down for that stuff.
They were not that
Okay,
hard.
cool.
I don't.
Just because some of these
think.
these like really storied songs, I feel like are often under lock and key.
Yeah.
And somebody has to sweet talk somebody into letting you put it in your thing.
No, I feel like it's usually like the young cool kids who are like, I'm not working for the man.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
But that's over, by the way. I remember when we were growing up, selling out was a notion that people adhered to, and it's
Yeah.
done now.
Exactly.
Like, I remember there being
I'm
a
watching
whole
the
thing
Kardashians.
There's a band whose song got used in a commercial. It was like an Outback Steakhouse commercial or something. And they had to put out a press release being like, listen, we're really sorry. We just need to pay the rent. It's extremely hard to get by as a band. And now people are like, yo, can you believe it? My song's in an Outback commercial. Yeah. Like everyone got fooled into...
I'm trying to direct Outback
Yeah,
Steakhouse.
I'm saying that's why I launched the show.
Yeah.
It's like our on-ramp to Outback.
Is this...
Yeah, this is all like a
This is
bloomin'
all-
onion
yeah.
like setup. But I do think there's a thing where somehow like this is about to turn into one of those rants that you get served on Instagram where I'm like, you really want to know about capitalism? But I think there's a thing there where something flipped. Like I remember growing up, we both grew up in New York. I remember growing up in New York where like there was my whole childhood, it was like, it seemed like the vibe was the kids I knew who were wealthy, they hit it. The whole vibe was like
Yeah.
dress tough, dress down. Something turned, and I haven't written my thesis about it yet. I'm like draft group 7. But there's something there about like at a certain point, like owning the flaunting of it was a whole other thing. So selling out like died then.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what it was. I don't know if it coincides with like, showy
Yeah.
technology where you're like, this photo's boring unless I'm like Scrooge McDuck swimming through the gold coins. But something turned. I don't know what it is.
Oh, I always wanted to swim through those gold
I know,
coins.
and I always wondered why it didn't hurt, like how it didn't injure himself.
Because when you're rich, money
washes up. Money is your water.
It's money's water.
Gold is his chlorine.
Gold is, yeah.
Slip, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me about the new show? And this isn't a plant. This isn't a plant. I'm just excited to hear.
Yeah. It's called Slip. It's coming out on Roku in the spring, and I wrote it and directed it and starred in it. And it's a story of a woman who's feeling like stuck in her marriage, and then, long story short, sort of learns that through orgasm she can travel into the multiverse and witness all of the parallel lives that she could be living with other relationships. Romantic relationships.
Wow. Something I think about a lot that was brought up last episode by Daniel Arnold was Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
It's not that like it actually rhymes that much with this, but the idea of
it has,
blinking and you're in another. I think about that a lot. Also, functionally, you must encounter that acting, directing, the idea that you show up somewhere and you have to be this person.
Yeah.
I think about that as like the perfect parallel for different challenges.
Yeah. And I mean, I wrote it in quarantine, which was obviously like a time where a lot of us were like utilizing fantasy
Dream,
to
baby,
like,
dream.
Yeah, stay sane. But even before, in the before times, I was always a person that would just like meet someone and be like, this may be love addiction, but like, what would my life look like with you? Like upon meeting, like I think women do that often. Not to be like binary about it, but I do think like that is something that I've always, and the fantasy is often probably like way different than what the reality would be.
No, it's always as good as the fantasy. That's the whole thing. Every life that you're not living is better than this one, and we're just we're failing it at all.
And we're failing it. Yeah.
I would think about this a lot traveling. I thought about that when I was always on tour. I thought the most fascinating thing was if you land in a town you'd never been in, and whether it's friend or otherwise, you encounter someone who's like, guess what? You're here for 36 hours. Step into my life.
Yeah.
And someone will be like it's the friend of a friend who lives in Detroit and like knows all the spots.
So
and you
fun.
have, for me, that was the closest I ever got to living more than one life.
Yeah.
The idea that you can try to get that, but they're all recon for future other lives I don't get to live.
Yeah.
Like there's some version of things, like I've lived in New York my whole life, and when people ask if I've lived elsewhere, I'm always sad that I haven't, but I feel like I have. But a lot of it is just a bunch of imaginings that I've totally seen through.
Yeah. Which is what life is anyway.
Yeah, I guess
it's
so.
just like a bunch of imaginings.
So wait, hang on. Do you now split time, or are you?
Yeah. I've been splitting much more time. I've been in New York editing the show all summer. Last summer, was like a wild summer over here. I looked at Ben. And that was
Our first.
Everyone lost their virginity to Ben last summer, and it was late.
But it was like
late in life, but it was
worth
worth
it.
it. Worth
like
it.
a caring hand.
Yeah, very caring hand. I think because I hadn't been away from New York for longer than a few months ever in my life, and then in quarantine, it was the first time. I think that's when I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of LA. I gotta get back to New York. So then I've been spending more time.
Did quarantine send you there, and then you're like, oh no, why'd I do this? Or you were stuck there for quarantine and were so sad you couldn't come back?
No, I was living there.
You were already? Okay.
Yeah. I lived there for like 10 years. That's probably the beginning of my selling out. And I was like very much like, fuck New York when I moved there.
No, you weren't.
I was.
Really?
I was. I was like, I would come back to New York and like talk to all my friends and family and be like, you guys are chumps. You have no idea what's going on over there. It's warm every single day.
You wouldn't believe the produce they got out here. You ever heard of a farmer in a market that they have? Like, what were you worried about we didn't have here?
Warmth.
Oh yeah, overrated.
Warmth,
I hate the summer.
Consistency in weather, warmth.
So monotony
Also
and
a car.
sweat. Yeah, oh, that's
I like
good.
a car.
That's good. So you like spending money while sweating.
Yes.
And then
So I know this is good.
I hate those things.
There's a healthy debate. And then over time, I was like, damn, I miss New York.
I can't abide by myself becoming a New York caricature, so I strike my comments from the record.
No.
I'm like, oh, bagels
I was
and
always
pizza.
like, I can never live anywhere else.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, I can very much live here in LA. Because it felt like,
It's whenever I go, I feel like that.
I felt a little bit like it was like getting out of an abusive relationship, just a little bit. And then
A lot of knowing laughter. No, that is it sounds like a viable
because
parallel.
you're like, New York is like, it beats you up a little bit, and you just are like, but that's the price you pay to live in the greatest city in the world. But then you go somewhere else and you're like,
Is this the greatest city in the world?
no, it's not the greatest city in the world, but
It doesn't
but
treat
what
me
about
poorly.
that price? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like maybe be with a little bit of more boring dude who treats you better.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I mean, yeah, it's like, the wagon runs just fine. You also did another thing I'm dying to talk about, but I don't know if you're allowed to talk much about it, which is you're in the new Ari Aster movie.
Oh yeah.
I can't believe that.
Me neither.
I mean, I believe it, but I mean, I'm extremely excited about it.
I'm extremely excited about it.
Can you tell anything about it? Or about your experience working on it?
It was, I think that he describes it as a 3.5-hour nightmare comedy, and that is what it is. And it's like the best script I've ever read, I would say. Just madness and genius.
Granular question, did it change much from when it hit your desk and you loved it and then you're there shooting it, or does it stay pretty true to the script that you fell in love with?
True, but I got cast pretty close to production,
Cool.
so I don't know what the incarnations of the script
Right.
were before that, but he's so brilliant. I was such a huge fan of his before, and then getting to work with him and play as an actor, like, he allows for so much play, and he doesn't take, like, he makes films that are serious and dark and like, yeah, get under your skin, but he has such a like sense of humor while doing it, which is a sort of an amazing combination of things.
That makes sense to me because the movies aren't like dirges. They have energy, even though the energy is like swinging a hatchet at your face sometimes. They feel really like
a literal hatchet.
First thing I saw of his was going to the theater with a whole gaggle of people to see. Do we say Midsummer or Midsommar? What's right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so we'll fix that in post.
Yeah.
We go to that, and I remember just being like, like two rows of friends like grabbing each other and being like aghast at what's happening. But it wasn't the like sink into yourself and be sad. It felt.
No, it's electric.
When you say there's room for play, does that mean you get to do so many different, like a spectrum of interpretations of a scene, or is it actually there's room for improvisation within that?
There's room for improvisation.
Really?
Yeah.
Everything seems so exacting.
Well, I mean, I do this too as a director. It's like, get the words on the page, but then once you've got them, like, you can play
Like once you have a
around.
safety or something?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
And he does that, and he also will call things out, in the middle of a scene to say that are like wild and will totally like open something up, and just like wild shit. Had to bark like a dog. Stuff that you just are like, what? Never been asked to do this before.
So
as an
in the middle of a
actor.
scene where you're like, I love you, and he goes, bark like a dog? Or,
The barking like a dog was in the script.
oh, okay,
It would be
okay.
amazing if that was like a love scene.
When you're barking like a dog, say, bark, I love you. So, unless I'm mistaken, you've done every combination of these things, right? Either getting to act in isolation, acting and directing, and more, producing things and writing. Is there a combination or non-combination that you prefer to do right now, or do you like mixing it up?
I do like mixing it up, but I like all three. It's
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool combo.
Does not exhausting.
It does not exhausting. It is exhausting as hell. It's like, it's a crazy thing to do. For me, it's really fun. Like, because you are like directing actors from the belly of the beast. Most directors are at a monitor, and so you're one step or more removed from the scene itself and the performers. And so to be like up in a performer's face and see what they're giving you, and also to be able to sort of course correct a scene or navigate a scene with my performance to change it as a director is really fun.
Oh, I was about to make a joke about you like chastising them under your breath, being like, that's not fun. But you mean like you can tell it's going one direction and you steer the
Yeah,
rudder?
or if I feel like, I want it to,
wow.
I want to loosen it up, I'll just like, as an actor, as a scene partner, do something.
And that doesn't pull you out too much?
No.
Or at all?
No. And
'Cause
then
it's
sometimes I'm like, am I
performance-based.
sociopathic?
Well, I mean,
But-
we'll talk about it later. But I mean, that thing of being able to navigate the moment while having the bird's eye view is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I love it because it's kind of what we're all doing all the time. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, think about that a lot. I was pretty into the rehearsal. I don't know if you like
Loved
that show.
the rehearsal.
There's all this dialogue around that show, but the thing that's so fascinating to me that the guy's examining is like, where does life end and performance begin?
Yeah.
Like that's what we're all dealing with every day. Yeah.
Totally.
My goal is that I'm being the same me with you that I'm being when I like shave or when I call my sister or when I whatever. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want those things to be like to be separated.
But I do, I mean, we all shift, but I do shift depending on where I am or who I'm with. When I'm shaving, I'm a completely different person.
Yeah, like angry.
I'm
Very angry.
I'm angry at the patriarchy. I don't want to be shaving. No, but I do think like when you...
That really worked out.
I'm glad I got a Ben laughing. Because he is the patriarchy. No, I am so interested in how blurry the lines are between life and art. And most of the things that I make are super personal. Like my writing is always just an exercise in like answering an existential question that I can't solve with my therapist.
It's an exercise in exorcising.
It is. It is an exercise in
Right?
exorcising.
Yeah. Now all I can think about is the code switching scene in The Departed, because I think about that movie all the time. When Wahlberg says, "Oh, but you use that other accent when you're down in Southie," like
Yeah.
that sticks in my head all the time.
Yeah, and I think as you get older and less cool, I'm just speaking about you specifically.
Yeah, me. Well, very old.
Yeah.
Extremely old.
Yeah. No, I think as we get older and less cool. No, as we get older and more cool,
And
you
more
sort of
cool,
settle
yeah.
into yourself so that there's less code switching. I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, I think
that
so.
that and I see that also as a director. I mean, I feel like a big misconception about directing is that you sort of have to come in with like bravado to run a set. But like my favorite directors are actually have a quiet strength. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
Which I think, especially as a woman on a set, that there is a lot of like code switching that's happening, or at least just a lot of sort of like looking from on high. How am I being perceived? Am I being taken seriously? And that's, yeah. I think as I've grown as an artist and as a person, I am doing that less and less, which is
It's like
nice.
Martin Scorsese famously said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Or that was Roosevelt, actually. But same idea, right? I guess it might be time to bring in someone who I think speaks softly and carries a big stick.
Yeah.
I'm nervous.
I'm scared.
I'm excited to
Me
talk to
too.
Martin Rev. We should bring him. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, we'll bring him in.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So we're back. Nighttime with Zoe, and now we're joined by Martin Rev. Thank you for being here. I already asked you, but remind me where you're coming from now?
Where we all coming from?
Oh God, I don't know.
But right now, I'm coming from Lower East Side.
You studio near here?
I do some work around here. Yeah, and I live around here when I'm in New York.
Wait, where else are you? I think you're always permanently in New York.
No, well, I got to.
I mean, other than tour.
I got to work, and sometimes I get a chance to chill, take a little vacation somewhere.
Yeah.
I get out.
Okay.
Okay. I don't need to vacate in New York. I'm here all the time. I'm here enough. You know?
The wild coincidence of all this is that Zoe coming on the show
Yeah,
has a new series coming out that opens with one of your songs.
that's amazing.
It's unreal.
Yeah, because it's timeless art.
Yes.
Well, get so many requests for that song. I don't know where it came. You know.
Do you not say a lot of no's? I assume you said no to everything like that.
No, we say yes to everything.
Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
mine was more
I mean, I
special.
should say
Right,
no.
yours was a special
It was a
yes,
special
yeah.
yes.
If
even
I had
though-
any integrity anymore, I'd say no to everything.
Oh, fuck you. Integrity.
it's-
You're like the walking beacon of integrity in the
true.
room.
Well, but you are one of the smarter ones. That you're not a musician. You don't have a band. You're a writer.
Yeah.
You do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wait, are you saying she's smart because she's not in a band?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does she need it for?
I used to
Fair.
play in a band when I was in high school.
Oh,
But
okay.
no.
Oh, you grew out of it.
Those were
I
good
grew
years
out
to
of
have a band.
Yeah. What do you need it for?
When we did that song, like everything else we were doing, there was no real audience for that. Nobody said, wow, that song, that's going to be this and that. And then 20 years, 30, 40 years later, I don't know. All of a sudden, give us that song.
Really?
Music. Yeah, that's how it happened.
So it took 20 years.
Well, when did we record it? We recorded it maybe 78,
Yeah.
okay? What is that? I don't know. That's not 20 years, that's like,
Yeah.
you know?
That's 20 plus.
It's like
20
22,
plus
20. Yeah, it's 20
That's
years.
45
Yeah.
5 years.
And then you come in and you want it.
And then I come in and I want it.
And not just you, I mean,
No. But
3 a day.
But didn't you know?
3 a day?
Didn't you know
No,
it was
I mean,
futuristic at the time? Like, didn't
No.
you know you were ahead of it?
Oh, yeah, sure. I dug what I did, and I knew it was the way I wanted to do it, the way I wanted to sound. And the two of us, we felt it was great. Otherwise, we'd never do it.
Right. But not just great. Like,
I mean, great for us.
but I mean, also, it still sounds futuristic to me. So I feel like in '78 or '9, it had to feel.
Well, nobody was, there was no. Everything was still a traditional rock and roll format: guitars, bass, and drums.
Well, but
Even punk.
what I like about that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I like that for you guys, that was both a forward-thinking thing and also a byproduct of necessity, where you were like,
Absolutely.
this is what we have access to.
That's all
This is
we
what
had.
we can afford. This is what
That's
we're going to
right.
do.
I couldn't afford all those synthesizers. I didn't want them anyway. I didn't like the way it's too much, too much to set up. And we couldn't move them around. We didn't have rehearsal spaces. We couldn't get other musicians to stay with us anyway for very long. We never really tried.
Yeah.
We're working maybe 3 times a year. Working, you call it, maybe making $10 or 25.
you were only playing like 3 shows a year at that time?
Oh, in the early days, we were lucky to get anything. I mean, we were talking about,
Are you talking about like between '71 and the record? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Because there's that stretch where you haven't put out the first record.
Well, when you first start, and New York was kind of in limbo. At that point, New York was almost like, we're closed down, we're out to lunch. Clubs, the 60s clubs that were happening, now we're closing. So we played Ungano's, one of our first gigs, and they closed like a month later. They let us in, they didn't know us about anything. I just walked in. So we used to get shows. Just used to walk in and say, hey, listen, man, we just did this gallery,
Yeah.
And they look at us sometimes and say, fuck, put them in,
Yeah.
And a lot of times say no, of course. So
Wait, is that the story with that show where like, am I wrong? But is that the show where you play twice? The first time nobody's there, you sweet talk them. The next time it's crowded.
close. That's the show where, like a Friday night, no one was there. That was our first night. Well, there was enough people, but it wasn't many. And when I took a break, we were playing 2 sets a night. There were 2 brothers, the Ungano brothers, and I think it was Arnie who originally said, okay, I'll give you this. We're playing with the Sun and the Moon. That was the other group. Suicide and the Sun and the Moon. It was on a marquee. It was incredible to see our name on it.
Yeah.
So we played the first one, and it was like, I took a break for between the 2, and I came back into the club, and Arnie's standing, he says, listen, Marty, he says, he says, you can't come back tomorrow. And we had the whole, we had the weekend, of course. And I said, what are you talking about, Arnie? He said, man, it was like 99 Iggy Stooges. Everybody ran out. But I mean, it was basically an empty,
But that was the goal, right?
Huh?
The goal. You guys wanted to. You wanted to scare
It
people
wasn't
away.
the goal. I never wanted to chase them away. I just
Wait,
wanted to
did
do
your
it.
bandmate want to scare people away?
No.
Okay.
He wanted to interact or confront them.
But it was purposely
It was part of the
confrontational.
stage. Alan was very influenced by Iggy Pop
Yeah,
at that time.
yeah.
So there was this confrontational aspect there, but the music was what we both grooved on, riffed on.
Yeah.
You see? So for me, and the more resistance we had, the more probably aggressive I've heard. And that helped chase him out more, and it helped give Alan more impetus to be aggressive. But the absolute goal for me was just to hear that fucking sound that it was right.
Well, man, I have a lot of questions about that. For me, the caricature of the band is one half is from doo-wop, one half is from jazz. I know it's not as simple as that, but I'm so curious. Like, I was reading about you over the years about, like, you, like, buzzing Tony Williams' apartment. You can correct me if this is bullshit or not. But buzzing Tony Williams, you're on the stage watching Miles play, Dizzy Gillespie's opening. This is a whole other scene. I did not realize you're overlapping with this scene. And then, for me, I hear your music. Your music is some of the place where I learned that bang, that repetition is like the tunnel to new shit. So what made you go from, is it true that it's jazz and doo-wop colliding, or is that a bullshit apocryphal thing?
Half and half, it's like cutting me in half because I'm the doo-wop and I'm the jazz.
You are both, right? Yeah. Right, okay.
I mean...
You didn't grow up far from Belmont Avenue, right?
I was actually raised in the Bronx.
Yeah.
But I was raised on rock and roll was my music, man.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't jazz when I was, to me, not yet. I discovered it maybe at 11 or 12. But all the way up to then, man, the songs coming off the radio, buying 45s, that was the music of my life. And that's what I lived by. That's what we fell in love to. That's what we went to dances at school. That's what we, learned to dance to or learned,
What records were you into then?
I think the first one was, second one was Get a Job. First one was At the Hop, Annie and the Jews, okay?
By the way, ba 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 ba, yeah, right.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
That's there already.
It's already there. So jazz came later to me. I'm actually still playing jazz in a way.
Yeah.
But jazz, but not jazz in the categorized sense where it stopped because it had its own vocabulary. It's not the same vocabulary. And
in the pioneering sense, I think.
They were all out of the same source. It's gospel, rhythm and blues. They all come out of that. It's all, American black music is the source. Mm-hmm. And some country and this and that amalgam, but basically it's the music of black America through slavery and through the church. So jazz was just an instrumental flowering of that developed that way, it was, they used to say, the American classical music, because it got very sophisticated and very developed in many ways and very innovative, and it represented its time perfectly. But when I heard it a few times, and I already knew how to play, and I had a choice, I was going to do singing then or stay with an instrumental thing. And I said to myself, no, I'm not going to do the singing yet. It was like too easy in a way, too. But there's more of a challenge maybe, but you get pulled, you pull yourself into that, and then what happens, like Elvis ends up, who's playing guitar anymore, Mm-hmm. Look at all the guys who end up.
Scotty.
So, at that point in time, it was so sophisticated what the jazz musicians were doing on their instruments. That wasn't something you learned overnight. Maybe 40, 50 years before that, when they started. So I said, wow, that is really hip. That is incredible. I want to be able to do that. That's the way I am in general. If I hear something I really like, I say, man, I want to be able to do that.
Okay, but the difference is that when it goes through your brain, it sounds completely different.
Well, yeah, it sounds different because I kept on evolving and I ended up back. I didn't really make a switch. I ended up back to myself. Because I was coming into the jazz world, in a sense, when it was going out. It was already peaking, and there was very little work in jazz, especially for newcomers. And I kept evolving, through bebop, modern, Miles's period, train, and then through the avant-garde. And now I've evolved through where I'm actually understand and playing, and now there's still no real place for me to, as a musician, as a working musician, still can't pay any bills or anything with that. So I keep going, and the only place I evolved into, what was still left that was open, because jazz, once you hit the avant-garde in art anyway, usually it's the end. No, because
there's no more track left for the train.
No, it's the last stage of all that, everything that came before, all the information comes, the abstraction. Abstraction is usually the last form of painting, abstract expression. Once in a while, you have something come in from left field that really takes it further, like Basquiat, an individual, say, because he's coming from a whole other cultural thing too. But that's rare. So pure abstraction, the same thing was wasn't it in European music? After like 12-tone, Schoenberg and all those people. That was the end of the music. It wasn't the beginning. Yeah. Nobody starts like, wants to start in purely mathematical music. It's almost like it's their last resort because everything else has been so used up.
I had a thing with your music where I was into your music, but this whole experience where we were like locked in our apartments in New York, I have never been more connected with your music in my life. Where I couldn't go out, and I started blasting that first record, like that I didn't realize till after the fact that it was like pounding against the walls kind of feeling. And so, that's just my thing. But the actual question I have for you is, I always think about how a lot of the art that I engage with the most, or that moves me the most, is very just post-Vietnam. And I know some of that stuff is percolating, but in the moment when you guys are making that music, is that actually in the front of your minds, or is it one of these things that it comes out and later you realize it's a response to that
No,
environment?
Vietnam was very, very much permeated our lives and thought because, first of all, I left school right in the middle of the whole thing. They were drafting 200,000, 300,000 a month sometimes.
Yeah.
And I said, fuck it, I can't do this. I'm out. And I just dove right out in the middle of that whole thing. It was always there. And when Nixon bombed Cambodia, man, I was ready to fucking go down and do something crazy down in Washington. So that was a big part of the time that we started, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
But I had been, of course, a musician, like I was saying, up to that time, before Vietnam, and Alan had been a visual artist before that time. And after hearing the Stooges in New York, their first gig in Forest Park, Queens.
Yeah, that turned the tide.
He told me, I met him maybe a month or two after that, and he said, when I walked out of there, I said, I can no longer be an artist unless I perform after seeing Iggy. And he was a very developed artist already. He graduated Brooklyn College with, I think it was Ed Reinhardt was his mentor.
Whoa, yeah.
And now he had a life in Brooklyn. He was married. And then when he heard Iggy, he said, I can't do it. And he dropped out. The whole thing. It's like Gauguin.
Changed his life.
Like Gauguin, when you know the story of Gauguin, when he's a Sunday painter, so to speak. He paints on Sundays. Yeah. That's all, like a hobby. Right. He was a stockbroker, successful with a Swedish family. He had children. He had a wife in Sweden. And one day they're riding in the countryside with everybody in the carriage. And he says to his wife, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. He jumps off the carriage on the road, and he leaves the whole thing.
I've just seen Iggy Pop.
Family, huh?
No, I'm joking. Well, hang on. Were you both, is that both of your stories?
I had done that years before when I decided to.
You'd already jumped out of the coach?
Yeah, because when I decided I was going to be a musician without going to school, without following a traditional musical thing, and there was nothing out there for me except the love of it and to keep developing. Yeah. Oh, that idea, I got this idea. Tomorrow, I got, next day, well, yeah, I got to follow that idea.
Yeah, but man, that's what's so evocative about your fucking music, is that it sounds like the thing that someone thought and saw through. It doesn't sound obvious. It doesn't sound easy. It sounds like a thing. It sounds like you found the thread and pulled it.
Well, that's what had been living on since I was the minute I knew I wanted to do that, which is probably about 11. Whether it was jazz or it was anything else, it was always like, wow, let me try that. Try that. Tomorrow I'm going to try that. That's it's between your head and what you do.
Yeah.
But the rest is desperation, I guess, in the back of you. That's why you're saying that gives it a certain, immediacy.
Yeah.
Because you're on a slow raft in a wider and wider sea, further and further from any land, any connection.
But there's so many ways you could process that, and the way you guys did that was to make the most frenetic, exciting music imaginable.
Yeah, well, we met each other. We were both on that raft. We were both on rafts, but usually there was no one else that we had really known at that time in our lives. I mean, I was about 20, 21. No one else was that out on that limb.
Fuck.
And for Alan and for myself, and then the realization was, for me, maybe more than he, but rock was still an open frontier. Everything else was closed, but you could still do or try, because it was the 70s, man, you know? And it hadn't closed up yet, so, hey, you can still really screw around in the rock world. Yeah.
Did you like working with Ric Ocasek? Was that a good experience? I know you did a bunch of shit together.
It was a good experience, and basically Rick is he was a wonderful cat, man. And he was a very intelligent guy. The first record he did with us, which was our second record, as you probably know, maybe Michael Zilka on his label, Z.
Z, right? Yeah.
And Z, no, actually we did Dream Baby Dream with Rick too.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. That was those sessions, right?
That was Marty Thau who said, because Rick was always talking about to them and whatnot, how I'd really love to produce these guys. He heard us in Boston on one night at the Rat.
The Rat, yeah.
You know the Rat?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was the Cars they'd just done their album, but they hadn't yet started getting behind it.
Oh.
And they came to the dressing room still with long tweed overcoats.
Oh, so he wasn't a famous guy swooping in.
He wasn't a famous guy at all.
Oh, right.
So he had to come into the dressing room and told us how much he dug it with the band. They were very polite, quiet, intellectual-looking kind of guys. 2 months later, the record came out, and as I say, it blew up. You know, their first record just blew up.
It's like all hits, yeah.
And now you have a major Rolling Stones, written up star, so to speak, talking about suicide, mentioning suicide in his interviews. Cool. I mean, what is that? Like, not even a Grand Funk Railroad or any of those, I mean, they're big ones too. Nobody would ever, who's going to talk about suicide? We're lucky if you get a little sentence in a Village Voice or somebody usually putting us down. But he's talking about suicide. Nobody knew who we were. And then he kept doing that. And he started telling, the word was, how much he wanted to produce us.
That's great.
I think when Z signed us to a contract, Marty Thau sold him whatever he had, which was the single Dream Baby Dream, and I think Radiation on the other side, that hadn't come out yet.
Something about you and Ocasek teaming up,
well, it wasn't,
sonically doesn't, but also completely makes sense to me. Just in terms of someone who has an exacting aesthetic, hears what he loves about you and wants you to realize your exacting aesthetic.
And that's what it didn't really work that closely to our aesthetic, but it worked at the time. And Rick was the only one who'd get us recording after a while. Labels were never coming in and not coming in now. We never did more than one label at a time, and there were years in between. Yeah. We had to shop around for the next one. There was never any of that embrace for a company, major or otherwise.
Did you ever, you obviously felt pressure to make more commercial music.
No.
But what did you do with that?
And that's what I didn't like. Rick came from a different mentality. Now Rick was already a tremendously wealthy guy, very quickly. Married Paulina soon after that. So the two of them together. Rick was in that world, man, and he liked that world, models. Apparently Rick scuffled, and Ben and those guys scuffled for many years before the Cars. They used to play country music in bars and stuff, like in Baltimore. I think he's from Baltimore.
What?
Oh yeah, they didn't just start with the Cars, man.
I had no idea. They're just like a Boston pop band. They're doing like roughneck country bars in Baltimore?
Yeah.
No idea.
He was a musician, man. Musicians mostly,
Yeah, just like fighting
unless you come out of the studio and you make a deal
clawing
to
your way.
manufacture.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. They start with this, and they learn. That's how they learn what they're doing, what they want to do. They meet other ones. So he and I believe Ben and somebody else, that's how they have been doing that for years.
Right.
So that's why they didn't approach us from like, oh man, look at that novelty or something.
Yes, right.
So, but Rick was,
It's quite all right.
he absorbed that culture. He used to talk about how models,
Wait, keep on.
stands like, yeah.
Teach me.
That's the way to, and
Wow.
he dressed incredible, and he had the money to pay incredible money for clothing, stuff that I wouldn't buy for myself anyway, if I had it. But, so we were in different worlds.
But
he was a musician in that sense too, and
I feel like there's a philosophical gulf, but a philosophical overlap in that he cares about your philosophy being realized.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, which I didn't realize too, the last time I saw Rick, and I'm glad I saw him then too, was maybe a couple of months before he passed. Because years would go by sometimes, we don't see each other in the last 20 years or so. And we're sitting in the dressing room behind at a Bowery Electric because they're doing a tribute show at one of those. I think it was a suicide tribute.
Oh, no shit, yeah.
Yeah. So Rick and I are sitting back there with his long-term engineer, complice, Haig, who did all his engineering with him. He always took him everywhere, and he also did everything in his home studio. And I mean, Haig had been with him for years. So the three of us are talking, and Rick's talking about, yeah, man, when I first saw you, and he said the thing was, it wasn't music, it was art. That's what hit him.
Right.
You know? I mean, people used to say that in reviews sometimes, like in Europe, this is art, baby.
Right.
But to me, it wasn't, man, I was just doing what I did, what I heard.
Yes.
Rick was kind of from that too. He was like more of the pop art, the orientation of Warhol cultivation and stuff like this. So it wasn't ultimate. That's why the last record, but it was ultimate in the sense that he'd come up to us. If he hadn't had a record out in 2 years, he said, you guys, it's time to make a record.
Yeah.
I've got the studio.
Wait, I have a question about that, because there's long gaps between the records, because you're doing solo work. I recently...
No, even before that. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, okay, yes. But I really want to ask you about that See Me Riding record. Like, I didn't realize that was in there. Like, I don't know, I did...
In where? Oh, okay.
In you.
Oh, okay.
So my question is, it feels like a natural sibling to Suicide, but it's also this really, to me, this like intimate, very like, the love ballads you're talking, like, in the school of At the Hop, etc., but that era of love ballads, is that something that a record you always imagined making, or were you surprised that came out of you?
No, I wasn't surprised, and I never imagined making it. It just was the next place for me, based on what I was working on several months maybe before in terms of lyrics, in terms of melody, structures to glue the lyrics onto. And when I got to, I rented out, in those days now you can rent out home studios that people were running. They were renting out their studios to you. And when I got there, I said, okay, what do we have, man? This is what we have. I got the vocal booth, and I've got the good mic, sound booth, and he had maybe one keyboard and a couple of things. I had a rhythm machine I would maybe bring, and I started playing around with his stuff. And in that area of newness but restriction, limited area, which is how it all happened anyway.
I was going to say, this rhymes with the early days Suicide, what you have at your disposal.
So I found that record, those sounds, I found that way of building that record to what I had.
I love that record. That's a beautiful record. Are you as engaged with current music as you would have been when you were younger? Like, I feel like I no longer have my finger on the pulse. Like, are there new records that you feel moved by, or do you feel yourself, like, where do you listen? What's your listening sources of inspiration there? Broadly,
from a lot of genres, but I have the radio on a lot behind me and whatnot. Now you got YouTube. Sometimes I just don't even go to my CDs anymore because it's just more convenient. I hate to let myself do that sometimes, but I don't hate it that much. I just say, man, this is quick. I want to hear that song.
Yeah. Well, and what song is that though? You want to fire up a song? What is it?
It could be a rhythm and blues. It could be a country song. The other day I actually heard in the movie King Richard, Kenny Rogers, who I was never a close kin to anyway.
Huge Suicide fan.
Kenny Rogers?
I don't know. I'm joking.
And
what song?
They were playing The Gambler. Now, when The Gambler was already out, and he was so popular, he was on TV. Well, Kenny Rogers, they just over-saturated everybody like anyone who's successful. The radio's playing all the time. Anyway, I used to see him all the time. I said, no, who's this guy?
That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And then I heard it. There's a great scene in this King Richard movie. So I was watching on a flight. Richard's driving his two daughters on a dirt road, something in the country. He's talking to them. He's giving them a lesson.
Venus and Serena.
And they're playing.
FYI.
And they're playing The Gambler behind, right?
Yeah.
And I said, wow, that's a great song. Huh? It's just so right, so indigenously correct, sincere, and colored.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Before we go here, are you able to listen to your old records and actually appreciate them?
I can listen to them. I tend to appreciate them. I don't listen to them much.
Okay.
I don't listen to anything I've done that much. Sometimes I have to because we're doing a reissue, we're sending it to mastering.
Quality control.
So now, yeah, you want to, I don't really want to, but if I let a glitch or something go by, it's my fault at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't listen to every sec. I can't do that. And I always have a certain, I'll hear certain criticisms. I could have done that and that. Maybe it could have been a little different.
Oh, like regretting things from the studio?
No, just you always do that. You do a work,
yeah.
and then you know Pierre Bonnard, the artist. You ever hear of him?
No.
The French artist.
Mm-mm.
He sold a painting in Paris once to a guy on the streets in Paris. He was a known, around Impressionism at the same time, but he had his own identity. So he sold this painting, and years later, he was walking down Paris, and he saw the owner of the painting, and the guy said to him, "Oh, Pierre, you have to come over and see the painting on my wall and the way I, hung it." So Pierre had nothing else to do anyway, I guess by that time, and he, "Okay, I'll come over." He didn't mind maybe getting in somewhere out of the cold, who knows what time, weather it was. And he saw the painting on the wall. So the first thing he did, he reached in his coat pocket, he took out a paintbrush, maybe a little paint, and he started touching up something. So the guy is sitting on his couch. He sees Pierre take it. He says, "What are you doing, Pierre?" He says, "That's my painting. What are you doing to my painting?" And that's an interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's your painting, but it's Pierre's.
Who owns
Oh
it?
my God, that's insane. You can't put your paintbrushes on that music. This music is perfect to me.
No, but
it's not to you, but it's my experience. I gotta box you out. Like those Suicide records, man.
Yeah.
How do you maintain the duo dynamic for decades? I know there's breaks, but how do you stay friends?
It's easier when there's when you're two people. First of all, as a band, because the more people you have, the more chances there are, as we know, people dropping out, people getting pissed, getting tired.
Yes, it's localized that way.
Ego
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
I do the music. Alan does the lyrics.
Yeah.
He writes the lyrics. I write the music. That kind of thing. So we never really get in each other's way.
Which came first?
When we write something, the music. I come in with something, and then Alan, because Alan's usually writing lyrics too on his own in between.
Right.
And now he hears what I'm doing, and he pulls out something, or he improvises something. But so he's got his own sketchbook in his head.
Just less paths for conflict.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's arithmetic,
The key to success.
Simple.
So, yeah, wow. You are a king. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now something special, a live performance from Tchotchke.
Margaret is clean, like the girls in magazines. Hums a melody while trimming her garden.
Stefan Palmer, Alex Dragon, Stefan Aries, Martin Rev. Thank you so much.